Hey, wait a minute. That's my script. Get out of here with that noise. You guys aren't supposed to see that. You're supposed to hear me say it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Simply Cyber Firesides. I'm your host, Dr. Gerald Auger, and today we're exploring cybersecurity in the transportation industry with Ben Wilkens, who's a principal cybersecurity engineer at the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. Now, you may know Ben from Simply CyberCon 2025, where he was a speaker, and I had the unbelievable privilege to get to hang out with him for like a solid hour the night before the event at, kind of a speaker, whatever, throwdown happy hour thing. And did not know Ben before I met him at that bar. And the conversation was so awesome that I was like, bro, you've got to come on Firesides and talk about this stuff. And he agreed. So that's how this came. Now, if you don't know Ben, he has a really unique perspective, and it, really complements how cool he is. He's got CISSP and cloud certs and systems. So he's really got that GRC mafia love at his heart, but he's also an active Class A CDL with years of experience as a truck driver. So he can get in one of those, those big rigs that have like two trailers behind him, and you're like, whoever's pulling that thing must know what they're doing. Like, that's Ben. Ben can do that. This gives him a really rare combination of giving him insights that most security professionals don't have. He understands both the tech and the real world operations of the industry that he's serving. Now, at NMFTA, Ben leads research developing cyber strategies for the freight and transportation sector. And he recently released the 2026 Transportation Cybersecurity Trends Report, which is what we're going to be talking about a great deal today as we go through the stories. So this report highlights a growing problem, and this is organized crime targeting the industry through freight fraud, cargo theft, load board scams, and sophisticated social engineering. And if you're like me, who only heard or only understood the word sophisticated social engineering, you're going to want to enjoy this conversation, because I had no idea how involved organized crime was in using cyber capabilities to achieve more traditional crime like fraud and theft. It's unbelievable. Like, I always think of cyber criminals as like these like nation state threat actors and financially motivated guys outside of Eastern Europe. And no, like, we got some homegrown ones using tools of the trade in order to achieve their goals. We're going to talk about organized crime groups, how they're attacking transportation infrastructure, emerging threats in freight cybersecurity, and practical strategies for protecting supply chain operations. So if you are in chat live with us right now and you have any questions for Ben during the show, just put a Q in front of it and ask it. If you work in transportation or you're interested in exploring a new area of cybersecurity that I got to tell you is absolutely fascinating, you'll want to engage and get this going, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to talk to someone of Ben's specific pedigree in this industry, both cyber and transportation. Now, he is a Simply Cyber community member too, so don't be shy, everybody. I'm going to do it myself. Drop those emotes right now of Oprah. Let him know that we love him and we're ready to grill him. Not really. We're here to say, what's up, Ben, and get some interesting stuff. So put it together. Let's welcome Ben to the stage. Ben, what's up, dude?
What's going on? It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on. I guess before we get into it, how's it been going? What's cracking with you?
It's good. It's like you said, the trends report is done. So that's always like, the push to get that wrapped up and out the door before the end of the year is always can get hectic, but we're there. Starting tomorrow, I personally am on some PTO through the end of the year. So I'm like, this is my hurrah out the door. I'm off.
I love it,
So
dude.
looking forward to that.
That's so cool. No, I love it. And we will get into that report. And if you're curious to get a little sneak peek, the report is pinned in the YouTube chat right now. So if you're on YouTube, just go ahead and hit that pin comment and get that report. Absolutely free report. Super cool. We're going to go deep into it later on in the show. Now, you might be like, hey, wait a minute. I was told there was like a pistachio story here, like the title card, something about pistachios. So I just want to dive directly into this. So Ben, when Ben was at Simply CyberCon and he's talking to me, I'm like, "What do you do?" Like, I hate to be so like blunt about it, but like, what do you do? And he's like, "Oh, I do cyber for like organized crime." I'm like, "What do you like? What?" He's like, "Do you know about pistachios?" And I'm like, am I being punked like right now? And he's like, oh no. So Ben, like talk to us. Like, why is there cyber? Why do you have to have cyber in transportation? Don't we just put the things in the truck and drive them to the place?
You would think it was that simple, right? We pick stuff up in one spot, we drive it down the road, we put it down in another spot. And when you really boil it down, it is that simple. The trouble is it is also increasingly digital. And we all know what happens when something goes increasingly digital. Your attack surface broadens from a cybersecurity perspective. And it hasn't taken long for people that are interested in cargo theft to figure out ways that they can do it without cutting locks on the back of a trailer and like the Smoking the Bandit kind of stuff, or Beverly Hills where they're selling cigarettes out of the back of a trailer or something, right? Um, so what we're seeing is this has evolved into a highly sophisticated cyber enabled wing of organized crime. So they use the same exact tactics that any other cyber criminal is going to use: social engineering, spoofing sites, stealing identities, stolen credentials, all that same stuff. But what they're doing is they're finding valuable freight from a resale black market perspective, valuable, and some of it's stuff that you wouldn't expect. We think about TVs, electronics, high end, NVIDIA chips that are being transported, stuff like that. That you're like, oh yeah, that's what everybody goes after. And what you find is it's things like bottled water, eggs, pistachios, and all these things have something in common. They're consumable, so the evidence gets destroyed by the person that purchases it by design. And they're also almost impossible to trace. I mean, if I take 1,000 pounds of pistachios and I dump them in a vat of 10,000 pounds of pistachios, can you find mine versus the ones that were already in there? It's impossible. And so that's what they're doing. They're using cybercrime techniques to gain entry, to get information, to track down these loads. We love to be able to find where our shipment is. That same capability where we can track where our load is, the criminals can use to track where a high value shipment is. They can spoof that information to make you think your load is still where it should be. It's halfway across the country. And so it's prolific. I mean, it's a massive, massive financial drain on the industry right now.
So I mean, I have like 30 questions. So I guess if it's okay with you and chat, I think this is a logical way to do it. Let's kind of do the kill chain, and like I'm kind of curious about the defensive approaches around it. So like, first of all, I guess pistachio farmer, is this where it begins? The pistachio farmer sells it to some wholesale distributor. Is that, and then
Yeah.
they get in at that point, or are they looking at the wholesale distributor and seeing what's in the warehouse?
So there's lots of different entry points, right? Because the supply chain is incredibly complex. There's a lot of hands that touch every shipment between, if we take the pistachio example, and the reason I think it was pistachios we landed on is because an article came out the day of or right around the time we've had a record crop of pistachios. And so everybody's like bracing themselves for the record levels of pistachio that are going to occur this year. But there's a lot of different entry points, because if you think about how the supply chain works, so if you'll humor me, I'll just give you a quick primer on shipping. So the producer, or in this case, the farmer, has to contract with someone who's going to find them a carrier, a truck driver, who's going to take their product from the farm to some sort of a facility, processing facility. Then at the processing facility, it gets, handled, packaged, whatever, ready for retail. And then from there, it trades hands again. And it's got to be probably sold to a broker, a freight broker, who's going to then find another carrier to take it from the processing facility to, let's say, a distribution hub, a warehouse somewhere for resale. And then there's probably a contract carrier or a fleet or someone who from there, it trades hands again, put on a new truck, and it goes from there to final destination. And now that there's variants of that across the supply chain, but it's a similar process. So if you are the producer, in this case, the pistachio farmer. I guess it's a farmer, or I guess I don't know a lot about how pistachios are
You
actually.
know, are pistachios
Oh,
coming off
pistachio
trees,
farmers, yeah.
right?
They're a little nutty, right? But we're gonna be, if we play the role of the farmer, we need to understand who it is that we're selling this load to. We need to vet that broker that we sell the load to, and then we need to make sure that the truck they say they're sending in to pick up the pistachios is actually the same truck that they told us it was going to be. Because what happens is you'll have a cargo thief will insert themselves into this supply chain. Maybe they're monitoring email traffic at the broker, and they see there's a pickup happening for this high value load of pistachios, and they know that this truck is supposed to be there at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. So they're going to hire their own truck or send one of their bad actors in a different truck to pick up at 6:30. And he's going to get there and he's going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm picking up load ABC for Acme Brokers. Supposed to pick up at 8. I'm running a little early. Can you load me?"
Is that common?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day. And so the farmer is going to say, "Hey, the truck's here early. I got stuff to do. I'm going to get him out the door." And they don't stop to check, is the driver's name the same? Is the truck number the same? This company has red trucks. Why is a blue truck pulling in the yard? It's things like that that are the first layer of defense in this particular chain of events, is the physical verification of the person showing up. Does it
So
match who you're
just
expecting?
just pause. I mean,
Yeah.
this is good, but like I need to ask these questions in time.
Yeah, yeah.
In that particular instance, is the farmer the one who gets screwed, or has the farmer already been paid? And it's like there's a term for it where like who owns it, like at what
Right,
point the ownership changes. Is the
right.
farmer get screwed in this instance when they drive the truck there?
Yeah, because, well, a lot of times what's gonna happen is the farmer gets paid when the load gets delivered to whoever he's selling it to, right? Because he's actually selling the load to the processing facility, right? They contract with the farmer because they want 40 loads, right? And if he only delivers 39, he's gonna get paid for 39. Well,
Mhm.
he shipped 40. One of them just disappeared in transit. So he's out that load and he never gets paid for it. So yeah, he's the one that loses in this situation.
Damn. So in this instance, this is just like business email compromise essentially, right? Like they basically just see that the pickup's at 8, so they show up at 6:30 and steal it. Very low tech minus the
Yep.
email.
Yeah, and so, that's sort of the most basic model,
I
right?
I'm sorry, again, this is so fascinating to me. Where does the guy go with a truck of pistachios now?
He goes to a warehouse, and the driver may or may not know that he's hauling stolen freight, right? Because the criminal is gonna be acting like a broker, and sometimes they're gonna hire a legitimate carrier, an owner-operator, guy that owns his own truck. They're gonna post a load of pistachios going from here to, pick a city, wherever, and the owner operator is gonna say, "Hey, I need a load going there. I'll haul that for you." They agree on a rate. He picks up the load, he goes where he's told to go, and he drops it off. He doesn't know that the load was actually stolen cargo,
Oh my god.
and he delivers to a warehouse that's actually a criminal enterprise. It's run by the same bad actor, and he delivers the load. Sometimes he gets paid for the load, and he never knows. Other times, he gets stiffed and he doesn't get paid. So he's hauled a load, he's out the money of, the cost of fuel and everything else, and he's facilitated a crime.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that I mean, I almost wonder if is it common enough that farmers would have or businesses, I guess, if I assume a farmer almost is treated like a business, would have insurance against like their loads being tampered or
Yeah, and there are insurance claims, made all the time in the transportation industry for this exact thing. A stolen load is an insurance claim. The problem is a lot of people don't wanna report it, because if they report it, a load of pistachios is a lot of money. That's a big claim. And so they may not want it. It may be cheaper to eat the cost of the stolen load than to risk your premiums going up because this has happened before, right? And
huh.
so that's part of the frustration we have in the industry about even getting our hands around the scope and the scale of this problem, because we know, as massive as the numbers are that we see, there's CargoNet does some really good studies on the numbers that are involved. Um, But as large as those numbers are, we know it's underreported
Yeah.
because of that. So yeah, there's cost at every step of the way, and sometimes the threat actor is masquerading as a broker. Sometimes they'll buy somebody's profile. The FMCSA is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Authority, and they issue operating authority to motor carriers.
Hmm.
Um, and they will issue an identity that's supposed to be tied to a specific carrier. A threat actor can get a hold of that information and use that same information and act as that carrier to commit fraud, to steal loads. So then the victim is the legitimate carrier who's got a bad rap in the industry now because they're associated with all of this crime. So there's a ton of different impacts for one theft, depending on how it's perpetrated.
Wow. Okay. So you'd also mentioned some more. Well, give us some stories, because you were telling me some earlier that were just like really funny, and it just blows my mind when you hear about some of these transportation cyber attacks, and you're just like, what? Like,
Yeah.
how have I not heard about this? How is this not bigger news? What are some notable experiences from your 20 years?
For me personally,
Yeah, or just that you've been aware of. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, recently, just to stick with the cargo crime thing, one that a lot of people heard of that was in the news that wasn't, that kind of gave it an outside of transportation, notoriety, was the tequila theft. It was an order of tequila, Sammy Hagar's tequila, right? He produced a limited run, and it was hijacked. And I think they were supposed to go to Pennsylvania, if I remember correctly. It was coming out of Mexico. It was supposed to go to Pennsylvania, and it was stolen. It was put on a truck legitimately, but the truck didn't go where it was supposed to. It went to California, and they ended up the GPS signal slowly cookie crumbed its way all the way across the country over to Pennsylvania, just like it was supposed to. And
Wow.
it wasn't until it had been, it was supposed to deliver, then all of a sudden, oh, the truck's broken down. Oh, this happened. We're going to be late. And, they were buying time. And then the load had already been put on containers out in California and it was headed elsewhere. Now, in that case, they were able to actually track down and recover one load. But the other one, to my knowledge, was not recovered. So that was a recent example.
So, okay, so I guess there's a lot to unpack there. Getting a little bit more digital, how were they able to have a tracking beacon going in one direction while secretly moving the product in a different?
So spoof GPS signals, right? To the portal where the broker was trying to track the freight. They were injecting artificial GPS pings into that portal.
Like just through
So
like an API?
yeah, yeah. So you can do. I mean, it can be done in a few different ways. You can do it through the API. You can mess with the GPS signal at the GPS unit on the vehicle as well. That's also can be done from a hardware level. Most often, you'll see those being jammed or blocked. So it can be done. GPS can be screwed with in a lot of ways. We see it in kind of the war fighting theater. The GPS jamming and spoofing is a thing,
Yeah.
and they're just adopting those same techniques in this theater.
That is wild, man. So, what about is insider? I feel like insider threat would be rampant in this industry, because we talk about it in cyber in general, and yeah, there are bad apples everywhere, but like for the most part, you don't experience it too much in many organizations. But everything you're talking about right now sounds incredibly like it would be very valuable to be an insider and want to compromise yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and you see it for different motivations too, right? So it could be traditional insider threat motivations, just like any other scenario. But we see a lot of coercion. We see a lot of, because we're talking about organized crime. It's just a deal you can't refuse, right?
Yeah.
So it's those kinds of things where sometimes it's financially motivated. A lower paid employee wants to make a buck on the side. They see an opportunity, or maybe they're leaving and it's not under the best of terms, and they're like, "Hey, this is my golden parachute. I got a load of almonds that I'm going to boost on the way out, or sell to somebody for 10 grand, quick buck. So, we do see that for sure. Some of the craziest stuff is like, one of the models that's really susceptible to this, and I don't know if we can mention the brand here, but I think Amazon's big enough they can probably handle being name dropped.
Yeah.
But there was a case where there was a load of, I think it was gaming consoles. I don't remember which ones, but it was a load of gaming consoles, and we know how much that's valued. That's valuable product.
Well, especially the PS5s were like the hottest thing like 2 Christmases ago.
Yeah, and so this particular theft, it was an entire truckload of these that was stolen, well en route to from a manufacturer or an importer to an Amazon warehouse. It was stolen, and then a little while later, a vendor pops up that wants to resell on Amazon, and one of the things they're going to resell is, guess what? The same gaming console. And they ship their gaming consoles to an Amazon warehouse where they're going to sell them. Well, it's the same load of gaming consoles that should have been, that was purchased by Amazon originally. So, it's like they stole their product and they brought it back to them and said, "Can you sell this for us, please?" So they fenced it through the victim's warehouse. And the reason those things work is because a lot of these large, and this is not unique to Amazon by any means, but a lot of these larger supply chains, my load coming in of a certain product is no different than your load coming in of the same product. It's being bundled and resold. If I need to buy a gaming console and ship it out, I'm just going to grab one out of the stack. I'm not going to look and see if it came on Jerry's truck or Ben's truck.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's invisible immediately. It disappears.
Definitely explaining why like this is I think the lack of follow-up capability is like the most interesting thing for me. Like, again, Ben, I can't become a criminal. It's just not in me, but like I do respect it academically and I like to study it almost like, Sun Tzu or something. So, with cybercrime, it's really nice because you can be on the other side of the world and attack a target, but you do leave a digital trail which can be followed, and cryptocurrency is, traceable. So this is quite interesting and appealing. It's more effort and it's much more physical touch, right? Or I mean, there's a physical touch element, but
Yeah.
like you said, I mean, once the caper is complete, it's almost impossible to follow up on.
Well, and we do see a lot of overseas involvement, right? There are plenty of cargo crimes where the actual criminal never sets foot on our soil, never touches the freight, never is physically involved. It's an orchestration, right? They compromise communications, they steal an identity, they masquerade as a broker to get freight from a shipper. They turn around and they will sell that, or they even masquerade as a trucker to get freight from a shipper. Then they turn around and they sell it to an unsuspecting, innocent bystander, so to speak, in the industry. And then they coordinate a drop shipment out of a warehouse facility that maybe isn't the most scrupulous location. They don't check the source of their cargo very much. They find a buyer online who goes and picks up the freight, and they walk away. And they're 6,000 miles away.
All right, so I guess in a post-COVID world, this level of crime is still good for work from home. So
yeah, no, it's ridiculous, man. I mean, and that's actually, we saw a huge explosion in this particular problem with the COVID changed shopping patterns, right? So it changed consumption, it changed shipping patterns. It heavily impacted the transportation networks and the way we do business, and the kind of the expectation of, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now, and I don't need to really go and check what's the source of this gaming console I just bought on the cheap.
yeah. I mean, it's basically like proliferated. Again, not to say your age or whatever, but I'm very open that I'm old. And
I mean, I can't really hide it, man. I got a gray beard here.
Yeah, but I mean, like it wasn't uncommon like growing up. I mean, depending on what town you grew up in, but like things like fell off the back of trucks. Like my dad would come home with like a new microwave, and he's like,
Mhm.
look what I got." You know what I mean? So like, I mean, this has been happening, but I feel
Yeah.
like, to your point, in like this new modern era where it's like very much you buy everything online and just it shows up and you don't question anything. It does almost enable or make it a more fertile ground to plant in.
Yeah.
I want to pivot here for a second though.
Sure.
So one wicked cool thing that everybody needs to know is Ben and his team were responsible for developing and then delivering. Let me move your name here. The 2026 Transportation Industry Cybersecurity Trends Report. Now, this report literally just came out. And as I said before, there is a link in pinned to the YouTube chat. You can go download this right now for free. And I mean, it's pretty extensive. Ben, tell us about this report because I know you're very, very close to it. Tell us about this report, like really high level, like who's it for, and who can get value from reading it? Because that would help first of all, and then we can dive into the details.
Yeah, so this is really for anyone who is involved in the supply chain, really, at any stage. We focus primarily on the fleets and the owner operators, the trucking aspect of the industry. But of course, you can't really separate one piece of the supply chain from all of the other ones. And so what we do is we look at the whole sector, whether you're a shipper, a broker, a driver, the owner of a fleet, or you simply work in the field in one capacity or another, there is something in this report that you will take away of value for sure.
I like it. All right, so let's talk about this report. So, in the report, it highlights that the average breakout time for attackers has actually fallen to just 18 minutes, which is insane, faster than most human response teams can even mobilize. What was your reaction when you first saw this particular piece of data? And what are your thoughts about what it tells us about the fundamental shift that needs to happen in cyber at transportation companies?
Well, I don't know if I should say my first reaction out loud on air, but it's not good. Obviously, that's not good. It just goes to show how, if we I say we as collective on the defense side, if we are not automating and we are not fighting fire with fire, we are way behind already, right? So preparation, training, solid processes, automation, continuous detection and response capabilities that don't require human triggering. You need some of those automatic tripwires in place, or else, by the time you even know you've been hit, you're done. And we used to have, maybe a couple hours or even a day or more sometimes to take care of containment, and that's over. That's gone.
Yeah, and if you're just joining us at the top of the hour here, we're talking with Ben Wilkens, who's Principal Cybersecurity Engineer at NMFTA. Essentially, he is responsible for securing transportation loads. So think of the stuff that's actually inside the mill crate. And it's actually quite a demanding job and a very, very volatile threat actor landscape. Much more than you would think. So we're talking to him about that and about his 2026 Transportation Industry Cybersecurity Trends Report that just dropped. I just want to put a pause on this 1 second and ask you a macro question, because I've made some assumptions, but now I'm questioning my assumptions. When I think so I've built, corporate cybersecurity programs from the ground up, and there's a lot of commonality and stuff. You have, the workforce, then you got your tech stack, you'll have a SIM, right? You've got logs going in, you got detection set up for automation, firewall, email gateway, like all of these, MDM, right? All these standard kind of enterprise security grade tooling. Is that the architecture for the work that you're doing, or is it slightly different? Because it seems like kind of a different environment.
Well, it's all of that, right.
Okay.
So we have to do all of that because they're enterprise networks. They're doing email. They're doing all the same stuff as any other enterprise. And API connections, there's software, there's boxes to secure, all that stuff. Social engineering, training, the whole 9 yards. The additions that we have are these, I call them mobile networks. They're the rolling assets, right? So the trucks, the trailers, the electronic log devices, the drivers have to do their hours of service on an electronic, tablet or some other device that connects into the truck, and then it phones the mothership and stays in contact that way. So these are, not only are they physical assets with physical vulnerabilities on them, from a cybersecurity standpoint, but they're also connected vehicles. They're feeding telematics data back to, the vehicle manufacturer, to a track and trace functionality, to the logging devices, to dispatch. And, if you think about it, what's your perimeter there? Your perimeter is actually around every single vehicle, every single component. And so a fleet with, 3,000 trucks and 6,000 trailers or more, that's a lot of mobile assets that we have to think about as attack surface, that they could be exposed to something in another location, a maintenance bay. Somebody plugs into it with a diagnostic laptop. What's on that laptop? What's then going to be transferred when you plug back in another location? So those are all the things forward thinking that we need to be aware of in transportation that's unique from most industries. You think of, the aviation industry is the same idea. There's those mobile assets, shipping, maritime shipping, similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some different attack surfaces for sure.
Yeah, it almost sounds like this is the first legitimate time that I've ever seen where in the knock, sometimes there's like a map, like a world map or like a US map. And it's always like, why do we have that? Like, okay, executives, come on in, look at the eye
Right,
candy.
right.
Like what you're talking about for the first time ever sounds like it's actually valid to have it because you can see where the assets are and is everything checking out? Is there any anomalies?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, do you guys use a map? Like, is that a useful?
Yeah, so I mean, in my current role, I'm more focused on like research and education, and I don't get the cool eye candy toys anymore. But in an actual, my past life, I worked for a fleet, and we absolutely had a map with the dots moving on it. They move in real time. You know where all your assets are. Your
Yeah.
trailers have GPS units. Your trucks have GPS units. You can put that up on the wall, and you can see your fleet in real time. And that is a way from an operational standpoint that's helpful. But then, we're starting to see in the industry there are tools being built and introduced to actually incorporate the vehicles themselves, the telematics devices themselves, into your knock, into your SOC, into those dashboards for intrusion detection at the vehicle level.
Has there been instances of like, I guess automotive hacking of the trucks themselves?
So it certainly can be done, right? So we see it in the research world. There's all sorts of examples of how it can be done. There's been some studies. We've got a couple of very skilled researchers that have done it themselves, right, and demonstrated these vulnerabilities. It's less of a wide scale issue in the wild right now. We're just trying to stay ahead of it really as an industry. It can be done kind of proximity based, like Wi-Fi attacks and close proximity, but you need physical access or proximal access to the asset. And what we are trying to protect against is looking out further and saying, if we had a systemic risk across a fleet or across a certain manufacturer that caused a wide scale interruption of freight, we'd have a major problem. And so that's what we're trying to stay ahead of in the industry.
Yeah. Well, and another like I guess macro trend that I've observed over my career is like if if like that would be like jumping over like a 4-foot bar. If the 2-foot bar threat actors can already continue to jump over that, they're not going like that. No one gives them like cool points for like doing the hard thing.
They're
Right?
never going to work harder than they have to, man. They're
Right.
always going to take the low hanging fruit.
Of course, 100%. So we're talking with Ben here about this 2026 transportation industry security trends, cybersecurity trends report. Another thing that came out of this report was that Ben, you described how cyber crimes now operate like full-scale enterprises with recruitment pipelines, training programs, specialized departments. When did you first start noticing this professionalization of the crime, kind of element? And what surprised you most about how they organized these operations and how they've become?
Well, it's not a trend that started this year. Certainly, it's accelerated, and I think it's most notable how sophisticated these organizations have become. And that's really why we're calling it out this year. Is that we're seeing, they're highly organized enterprises at this stage. And It cracks me up. I had a conversation with somebody and we're like, man, they took all the things that we all complain about working for large organizations, and they adopted those practices. We never would have thought that the guys in the hoodies in the basements wanted to do that, right? But that's such a cliche, and the reality is there's billions of dollars in this industry, on the dark side of this industry, and in order to operate more efficiently and increase the ROI for every attack and your profit margins, you have to do the same thing any enterprise does. You have to streamline, you have to create processes, you have to specialize, you have to build relationships across your industry. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the threat actor space.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to get put on a PIP when you're on an organized crime
No.
company.
Like I said, that deal you can't refuse. These are guys you probably don't want to cross too many times.
That's interesting. I mean, do you think that we're like in an arms race with criminal organizations that have unlimited budgets?
Well, they're not unlimited, and I think so. I like to see it as there's two curves, right? And there's the threat actors are quite often, when a new technology comes out, they're on the lead lap, right? For a little while. They figure out all the holes that we didn't anticipate, and they figure out how to exploit them, because that's all they have to do is just kind of tinker and find ways in, right? And as they start to find the holes, we start to plug the holes, and we start to catch up on that, kind of anticipating. And it is an arms race. It's always been, and it's always going to be, ever since the old days of stagecoach robbery, and, better locks on the stagecoaches. And we're doing the same thing now. As new tools get introduced, people misuse them for nefarious means, nefarious ends. And we then find ways to, stop that hole, and they find another way around. And it's always going to be
the money's too good.
Yeah.
The money's too good.
And frustratingly, the consequences are too weak. That's something that we're really fighting right now, is the law enforcement side of this whole thing.
They don't
really even know what the crime is. When you try to explain to law enforcement what's happened with a double brokered load that's been drop shipped by somebody that pretended to be somebody else, they're like, wait, so nobody stole the truck? Like, no, that's not the point. Like, well, it sounds like a contract dispute, right? They don't even know how to handle this as a crime. Sometimes it's frustrating.
Like, they stole pistachios. They're like, all right, nerd. They took your lunch. Okay. Like,
yeah. Which ones? Which ones? Well, we don't know. That's the problem. We have no idea which ones were stolen.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is very frustrating, but understandably frustrating. It's not like law enforcement is just being obtuse. It's like
no. There's a lot of effort. At the federal level, there's a lot of task forces, and I think there's Operation Boiling Point was a Homeland Security Department initiative, and we've worked with the FBI Joint Task Force for cyber crime out of Memphis, I believe it was. TSA is involved. There's all sorts of levels. It's just such a thorny, complex issue that it's tough to get in front of.
Mike Gandruzzi wants to question you. Do you know of a platform for all the parts of the supply chain to communicate with each other? Seems like a lot of pieces to keep track of and lots of comms to needed for tracking.
So let me give you a little backstory on transportation. I always like to say, and not to pick on truckers. I'm a trucker. I was a trucker for many years. You put 10 truckers in a room, you got 15 opinions. So there's lots of platforms for all of the different parts of the supply chain. Some of them do one thing, they do it really well. Some of them do a whole bunch of different things, and it's a lot of integrations, API, or we still do a lot of EDI transactions between shippers and carriers. But there's a ton of different platforms out there. We call them TMS systems, so transportation management systems. Typically, some of them do everything from back office admin and accounting all the way through tracking your loads and posting loads on public load boards. But it's in nearly every single instance, it's going to be a combination of different platforms, which obviously we all know if you work in cybersecurity, it's the joints between those platforms that are the chinks in the armor often.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for the question, Mike. If you have any questions, whether it's follow-up questions for Ben or it's just you work in transportation, I think Kishan InfoSec's a driver. He was clearly sharing some things that sounded like only a driver would kind of understand and know.
I thought I saw some of that scroll through. I was watching that out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah, well, okay, so here's a fun question, because I've never driven a tractor trailer and I don't know much about it, but one thing I always hear about is like drivers are only allowed to drive for so many hours, and it's like a big struggle because I got to get to here to Albuquerque before I burn my hours, and like, whatever. But I've also heard of like manipulating books. I've heard of drivers, like they should be asleep, or they, and they're driving, and which is a risk, right? Are drivers also kind of committing cyber transgressions in order to circumvent that particular control?
So I've read in books somewhere, Jerry, that that's possible. But no, it really is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No,
I
I was a driver for a long time, and for me, the logbook was an obstacle that capped how much I could earn, right? Because drivers get paid based on the miles they run. They get paid a cents per mile, right? Like could be, back when I was running, it was not anywhere near what it is now per mile. But it could be, if you're a company driver, maybe you're making 60, 70 cents a mile. Maybe you're, and I may be dating myself because that may even be out of date now, but so you want to run, right? And when your hours run out, you got to park, and you're not making money when you're parked, and you're still not at home, right? You're in that truck somewhere, parked at a rest area or a truck stop somewhere. And so in the old days, everything was tracked on paper. You had to draw, it was like a little graph. You draw a line between, I'm driving, and then you go up, you're in sleeper berth, and when you're in the back sleeping, then you come back down, you draw a line back down to driving at 9 p.m. or whenever you start again, right? Obviously that's easy to commit fraud and to, doctor that and say, oh, I'm going to erase my line because I'm going to say I started later, and, those kinds of things. That was pretty common. And that's what led to what we call the ELD mandate, the electronic logging device mandate. So that's plugged right into the truck. It's feeding off of the same information as the telematics diagnostics port. And it knows when that truck moves, it bumps you into driving status. You can't really, there are ways around it. I know that people do it, but it's a lot harder. It keeps all the honest people honest. We'll put it that way.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that where, the drivers are competing against the clock. Parking is hard to find, harder and harder to find for truck drivers. And they are only making money when they're moving.
Yeah, I could find it quite frustrating to be parked in like a rest stop in like whatever, like Fredericksburg, Virginia, when your family lives in Massachusetts, and you're like, this sucks. Like, like I'm doing this work to provide for my family, but I'm not with my family. What's the point here?
Mm-hmm.
Michael Nolan coming over the top rope here. What's the most elaborate way someone's gone to hack a lorry?
No, we got a British viewer here.
Okay, yeah. So what's the most elaborate way you've seen someone go after a truck?
So I have seen some pretty cool stuff in the research realm. I think that's what the question is getting at here, is actually hacking the physical truck. So there's some pretty cool stuff that's been done in the research world where, and one of ours, we've actually released some papers on one of our researchers found a vulnerability where, using not a whole lot of money's worth of radio frequency kind of parts you could find anywhere on Amazon, or if you're a techie, you could probably find them in your closet, was able to actually chuff the brakes on a truck from, just without touching it, from a distance. And that's pretty shocking to witness as a driver who knows that sound. When I say chuffing the brakes, it's like the that the heavy trucks do. Because if you can get it to dump air, their air brakes, right? So it's anything to see. Anytime you see something that's messing with brakes in any way, as a driver, you're like, whoa, that's no good. Like, I don't really care what your motivation is at that point. I don't want you messing with my brakes. So there's actually some videos. You can go out to our website and you'll find them on nmfta.org/cybersecurity. I don't have the exact link in front of me, but you'll find them on there. There's some links to that study.
We're talking with Ben Wilkens, who is principal cyber engineer over at the NMFTA. And his team and him just released this 2026 Transportation Industry Cybersecurity Trends Report. A link to the report is linked on the YouTube chat. It's a pinned comment, so just grab it. It's free report. It's not like this is some type of like sales freaking webinar or something. Question came in though, Ben, that's pretty germane. T. Murphy says he was worked in IT and cyber for a 3PL, no trucks. I don't know what 3PL is, but he wants to know, is this report still worth getting into?
Yeah, so 3PL is a third-party logistics company. So they manage the freight transportation. They basically do everything from door to door for the shipper, right? If you manufacture widgets, you want to ship them, you contract with T. Murphy's 3PL, and they handle everything. They find the trucks, they find, they figure out all the
Oh, that
logistics,
sounds
they
like a
do the
very
whole thing.
valuable service.
Yeah, and so I would say absolutely yes. Please go read it. And part of the reason is a lot of the people getting burned are on the brokerage side. They think they're hiring a truck to do something for them, and the load disappears, and then they're on the hook. His company would be on the hook if that load disappears. So yeah, there's absolutely information in there that would be helpful to understand not just how to vet the carriers, but understand the techniques that are being used and some of the protections that are out there. We have a cargo crime specific document that, if you go out to get the trends report, you'll see some other guidebooks and things on there. And I would say to T. Murphy that the one of the interesting pieces that he might want to take a look, or they might want to take a look at, is the cargo crime report as well.
That on stream, Jesus. Sorry. Keep going.
That's all right. No, that's pretty much it. But I would say yes, absolutely. It's worth doing for sure.
Yeah, I was going to bring the cargo trends report up. I realize now I was opening the email that you sent me with the cargo trends report in it. Fool. I thought I had it, but
that's
yeah.
okay. I'll grab the link. We can put it in chat here.
All right. Yeah. Grab that. So that I want to ask the next question here. Now that we've got that sorted out. It's not as bad. Hey, Ben, one time, like my personal information was just shown on stream by one of my guests one time. So,
yeah, we all want to put that out there. Don't worry about the OSINT side of things.
Don't make it weird, Jerry. Just go with it. So I got another kind of follow-up question based on what you're seeing in this report that you and your team wrote. So think of a fleet owner, Ben. Okay.
Yep.
So for someone who's in chat, who's a fleet owner, works at a fleet, they've traditionally thought of cybersecurity as like IT's problem, right? We always deal with that. And then cargo theft is like the security team's problem. So like, what's your wake up message for these people that don't see like this is their problem, even though they're completely in the middle of it?
Yeah. And so it's interesting. That's basically the role that I have, is I'm the translator between all of those people, right? So I speak trucking and I speak security. And so what I do a lot of is educating fleet owners, C-suite folks, management type folks, that cybersecurity is not an IT problem. We all know that. Anybody that works in cybersecurity has fought that fight, where cybersecurity is actually a business problem, right? It's an organizational issue. And cargo security may be an operations side problem, like a physical security team. But man, that goes right to the bottom line. If you're getting loads ripped off, everybody speaks that language. That's money. And so we've actually found it's a good opener to discuss cybersecurity with folks that own transportation companies. Because we're like, you go in, and if I walk into a trucking company that's got 30 trucks and I start talking about, CSF controls and ISO compliance and all this stuff, they look at you like you got 3 heads. If I walk in there and I say, hey, there's some simple stuff you can do that's not going to cost you a lot of money, it's just process and best practices, and it's going to help you reduce theft of loads, everybody in the room is going to listen. And it's all the same stuff. It's the same cybersecurity controls, it's the same processes and operational controls. So it's it's translating it into terms that matter.
I love it. Now, a minute ago, Ben talked about the cargo thieves report. Here it is. Not my email, but actually the report itself. So I'll drop a link to this, but just since you're giving so much value today, Ben, what's this report about exactly, and why should people download it?
So this is specifically about the cargo crime stuff that we were talking about. It gives you kind of a primer on what is cargo crime in the transportation industry. And again, this is all the resources on our site are free. We're a nonprofit. We put this stuff out there to help the transportation community. That's the whole purpose. So this report goes into kind of an overview at the 40,000 foot view of the cargo crime environment, the types of threat actors, the law enforcement component, and then we dig into, the three spheres of security that can help mitigate cargo crime, where you've got physical security, gates, guards, guns, that type of stuff. We don't do a lot with that, but we do explain how that plays in. The operational security, processes, procedures, and then the cybersecurity. And then we kind of outlay how those three things converge to create an environment that reduces this risk of cargo crime, because it just makes it harder. Like you said earlier, the bad guys don't want to work any harder than they have to. So if they come to your operation and they're like, "Oh man, this sucks. We don't want to work this hard." They're going to go find another company and they're going to rip off loads from that company. And I hate to throw the other guy under the bus, but it's really about, we joke it's not about running faster than the bear. It's not being the slowest person running from the bear, right?
Right,
That's
right.
the name of the game.
Well, and for better or worse, you would think that it would motivate the others to improve their overall cyber and
Right.
harden it so it helps everybody.
Yep. Yep.
I like it. All right. So we're talking with Ben Wilkens here. Talking more about this uh, cybersecurity trends report you released, which is pinned in the YouTube chat. It would be silly if we didn't talk about AI at least once, right? Like, I mean, you can't go anywhere without AI. But
Yeah.
AI does appear throughout your report, Ben, both as a powerful defensive tool and
Mhm.
as an attacker's weapon for creating like really perfect phishing campaigns, deepfake stuff like that. Um, where do you see the balance heading in 2026?
Well, it's like like I mentioned earlier with the kind of the two curves, right? That the defense is usually the trailing curve, but they do start to meet. When we introduce new technology, we do find ways to start protecting more effectively against these kinds of things. And I think we saw this past year, I know we saw a lot of AI enabled or AI assisted types of social engineering, and that's not going away. That's the new baseline, right? I mean, these are effective, highly effective tools.
Yeah.
Deep fakes, voice spoofing, perfect phishing emails, the whole nine yards. That's not going away. We're seeing a reduction in the time to reverse engineer an exploit on a vulnerability. The 1 day exploits are a thing now. That's not going away. What is going to change in the next year is our ability to anticipate that and respond effectively to that, right? We're going to be changing the way we educate people about social engineering. We're not going to teach them to look for bad grammar and the Nigerian prince that's going to leave you a fortune. We're going to teach them to understand that the threat is actually going to come in a legitimate looking email, and you have to be on your, listening to your spidey sense about the context, the content. Am I expecting this? Is this the normal process? Is this asking me to deviate from an accepted business process? And if it is, that's the huge red flag, right? That's where we need to start throwing up the card and saying, no, 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 time out. We got to look at this. We're trying to deviate from a process here. This is a indicator of a potential attack.
In 2019, I think 2020, NotPetya happened. NotPetya, for those who don't know, NotPetya was a wiper virus. It was a Russian weapon to screw with Ukraine, and it was called NotPetya because there was a Petya ransomware that had come out months before, and this was made to look like it. So they just tried to make it look like a ransomware. Anyways, it was a wiper virus and it screwed over a bunch of Ukrainian businesses, but it broke containment essentially, and it actually really messed up a company called Maersk, which is like a super giant in the transportation industry. Costs like billions of dollars of damage. I laugh because it's just absurd how much money that was, not because I'm flipping about it. I'm curious, like, one, what was the vibe, because you were around in transportation when that happened. Did that have like ripple effects, and I'm curious like what was going on then, and two, like, do you guys even like worry about that? I know it was not a deliberate attack, it was an accidental collateral damage, but like it just seems so effective.
Yeah, so the immediate effect of that was felt in the ports, right? Because Maersk is a shipping giant. They do a lot of, the global container shipping, whether it's land or sea. And so immediately, because all of their systems were down, nothing could get offloaded or unloaded at the ports. And so there was an immediate backup of that constant stream of trucks going in and out of those intermodal yards to pick up containers, and that would ground to a halt instantly. Um, That was it's interesting how they eventually got out of that one. That's you familiar with how
Yeah,
they got out of that with the
I
one
am, and
server
it
in
is
South
very
Africa?
interesting. But
Is it?
go
Yeah.
ahead and share it with everyone.
Yeah. So it like literally took out their entire AD structure. And in an organization this size, they're global. They, thousands and thousands and thousands of AD servers, and they're all nuked. There was one that I think it was in South Africa. It was somewhere in Africa.
Yeah.
And it was the only one that had like an internet outage. It was like a crummy, it was probably an old dial-up line on this thing, right? At a remote location, and it survived the attack. And they literally flew someone from headquarters down to put this drive in a briefcase and bring it back and clone it and rebuild their AD from that. I just think that's amazing.
Yeah. I just Googled it. It was in Ghana.
Ghana. Okay. Yeah.
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 But yeah,
A
like
long ways from home. Yeah.
treating it like it was the nuclear football. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
private jet, go get it, come back.
Yeah. But in transportation, I think it was a bit of a wake up call. We have something called a lot of concentration risk in transportation. There's a few software giants that really run a lot of those platforms that we mentioned earlier. There was a viewer question on the types of platforms. There's a handful that have the lion's share of the market. So an accidental outage or an intentional attack doesn't matter. If that software goes down, it's like we saw with all the car dealerships. What was it? Fall 24, I think that.
Yeah, was it CDX?
Yeah, I think it was took out a ton of dealerships, and that's not an attack on any of those dealerships. That's an attack on the mothership, so to speak. And so those are the kinds of risks. And when you see this giant like Maersk get taken out and the effect that has immediately on global supply chains, that's the wake up call. And that's, again, to go back to what we're trying to protect against at the asset level, the truck and trailer level, the telematics and the ELD systems. If one of those large scale providers were to go down, you're not taking out one truck. You're not taking out one fleet. You could be taking out tens of thousands of trucks all across the supply chain, right? And so that's where the real risk lies, is those concentration risks, I think.
So I am curious, like in a power company, there's the IT, which it's a business, it's corporate, and then there's the OT. And you mentioned earlier, yes, like our business requires all the IT stuff because it is a business, but then you've got all these GPS locations and logging and telematics and stuff. Is it all IT, or are you guys kind of like not necessarily OT, but I mean, do you treat them as one network, or is it do you segment it? So it's pretty common to have your, finance, accounting, business stuff over here, and then all operations, logistics over here.
Yeah, we encourage people to, because you've got to treat your trucks, your trailers, their temperature sensors, your ELDs, all that stuff. It's more like OT. It's a little bit of a variant, but it's IoT or OT, however you want to classify it. It shouldn't be on your main network, right? And like your maintenance bay shouldn't be on the same network as your accounting department. And so it is network segmentation similar to ICS controls and things like that. Is good practice. It's not necessarily widespread adoption across the industry as much as it should be, but that's part of what we're trying to educate about, is like how to effectively do that, even on a shoestring. Because a lot of, I think it's 90% of the motor carriers out there have less than 5 trucks. There's a lot of small operations, so they don't have IT teams, let alone a security team. So it's just about understanding how to properly segment what you do have is important.
For those services, again, just the OT services, for just to give it a quick name so we can talk about it, how dependent are they on things like BGP or AWS infrastructure? Like when some of these large things go down, the internet kind of hiccups. Is it I don't think it's a private network. I mean, it's still on the same internet, but how reliant are they on some of those upstream things? Like when Cloudflare was choking the other day, I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah. So it's like anything else that's cloud-based, right? Because a lot of these they're SaaS solutions where they're the management portal is a SaaS portal. And so if that's hosted on Azure and Azure goes down, if your redundancies don't have an alternate cloud failover, then that portal is going to be down, which means it's going to impact operations and communication with your fleet. So there's definitely the same risk there that the broader internet faces. We we at the vendor level, they've got to make sure that they've got proper redundancies and failovers and those kinds of things, because it's mission critical software.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering how resilient they would be, as far as like, because you can't have like, two GPS devices on the truck, one going to one infrastructure and one going to another. That'd be
You got
ridiculous.
enough of a fight talking a driver into putting one on his truck. I mean, it really comes down to design at the vendor level. Really is where you got to focus that redundancy.
Yeah. Sierra Montgomery, what's up, Sierra, says, where do international standards fall short in securing petroleum trucking from cyber risk? How can coordination be improved?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are good international standards for security that aren't necessarily national level standards here. Just to be blunt about it, that we don't really have those in this industry. I mean, obviously there's NIST controls, and those are good standards. The ISO controls.
Let it go.
And I love the new tool, by the way. I've already got it. I've been playing with it.
Cool. Yeah, nice.
That's
dude.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So, and I think we actually we talk a lot with sensitive material haulers. There's a couple of organizations where there's the tank hauler organizations, and then there's also for like radiological and radioactive transport is obviously very sensitive, and so there are special controls around those kinds of transport. And I think that's where the coordination of those controls is occurring, is at that association level and the industry trade group level. We're pushing that at NMFTA. We're pushing that uphill into the kind of federal and the NIST and NCCOE kind of space. But that's obviously that's a long-term goal. But yeah, I think standardizing, because there's never been a mandatory standard for cyber hygiene in transportation. It just doesn't exist. And so I think until we have some sort of standardization around this, we're going to see a hodgepodge of good security, bad security, and in between.
Well put, man. Ben, if you can believe it, we've been ripping an hour. Any final thoughts you want to share with the community before we dip out?
I just would like to say I love being a part of this community. I love what you bring to the community. It's really fun to be on here and share. I nerd out about this stuff all the time. I mean, my friends are so sick of hearing about transportation cybersecurity. They're going to stop inviting me over. But no, it's been great, man. Come check us out. Again, all the resources on our site are all free. Anybody can go. You don't even have to be in transportation. You can just come and check them out if you're interested.
Yeah, especially if it's like annual trend reports and stuff like that. That's very valuable for everyone. And again, like if you love cybersecurity, it's going to be a good report. But also, sometimes it's nice to study other industries, because you see other kind of innovative or specific niche issues going on, which gives you perspective on something that you might be able to utilize in your own specific situation or industry. So definitely appreciate that. Let me say we've been talking with Ben. So Ben Wilkens from the NMFTA, thank you for shedding light on all of this transportation cybersecurity. Like I said, I had this conversation with Ben at Simply CyberCon, and I was like, you absolutely have. Like, I think we booked this like that night.
It was that day or that night.
Yeah. Just the intersection of cyber and organized crime, which is an area I didn't even know about. Do go check out that report. Ben and his team just got it over the finish line. He's going to be able to relax, go on vacation now that he's done that. A lot of work going into it. So don't sleep on that. It is pinned in the chat. I will tell you, if you're watching on replay, I will go after the stream ends and put the link as the first comment and pin the comment. So just go down below, look at the first comment, and you'll see the link to pull the report down for free. No big deal. Get some of that. All about good times. Let me move this really quickly. So Ben, on behalf of the entire community, thanks for being a community member. Absolutely love having you in here and having you speak at the conference last year. I hope you can make it to Simply CyberCon 2026. Super excited about it.
Love it.
Love it. All right. Be well, everyone. Until next time, stay secure.